Welcome to the Samuele Tini Show, where business, innovation and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in.
Welcome to a new episode. Today we are going to discuss an important ally in fighting climate change, in regeneration of soils, and many other areas. So we are talking about biochar. What is it? We don't know. We will discover it with the executive director of the International Biochar Initiative from Mexico, Luisa Marin. Thank you so much, Luisa, for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, Samuele, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm super happy to share about my limited knowledge about biochar, but I hope that would be enough to get you interested and get your audience interested in learning more about it.
Fantastic, Luisa. I think your work in conservation, now biochar, we want to know everything. But before that, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who is Luisa? How you have entered this sustainability work?
I've been around working for the NGO world approximately for 25 years now. I used to work for Conservation International here in Mexico, the Nature Conservancy, and that gave me the curiosity to learn more about other tools to remove carbon to fight climate change. And then I had the opportunity of joining a carbon project development company for Latin America, where I learned about biochar and its amazing potential, not only as a tool to fight climate change by removing carbon from the atmosphere and then storing that carbon in the soil or in other materials for thousands of years or a little bit more, but also it has amazing benefits because biochar, I'll tell you a little bit more about the process, but about biochar, it's a soil regeneration agent, regenerative agent. It has any benefits for the community in waste management, generation and creation skills and learning, and also as revenue generation and reducing the inputs in the case of agriculture because gradually farmers use less water and less chemical fertilizer. So it's a direct saving. And then when the yields over the years increase, so they're getting more money and using less resources. But you may ask, what is biochar?
Exactly. And I'm already fascinated. So please continue because I want to know exactly, especially because it's something that many people they might not know, or maybe they're puzzling, oh, biochar, what is that? And also, if you can explain in simple terms, of course, what biochar is, you have just mentioned some benefits, and also what is the work of the International Biochar Initiative in that space?
There you go. So let me begin with our work in International Biochar Initiative, and then I'll jump right away into what is biochar and why biochar. So the International Biochar Initiative, or IBI, is a global nonprofit that works to unlock the full potential of biochar and to support climate, soil, and sustainability solutions. Our mission is to empower communities and inspire industries to integrate biochar based strategies, bringing science, this is very important, science and innovation together for healthier ecosystems and resilient economies. And our vision is simply and bold a healthy, thriving planet for all. So IBI was born almost 20 years ago in 2006. So it was from a collision of academics, business leaders, and policy advocates that united had this shared belief that biochar has to be safe. And that is why IBI issued the first standards. And when I mean standards, I mean the laboratory characterization that defines what is biochar. That states as a standard for the word, for the use of the right use of the word. What defines biochar, chemically and physically speaking. So they defined the ranges of, different chemicals, components, carbon content, heavy metals, etc. And since then, IBI has been in charge of developing best practices, provide education programs, build a global networks of members, practitioners, entrepreneurs, and researchers. And those are around is mostly at the beginning researchers. But probably you may be familiar carbon credit generation and different biochar methodologies that are out there that boost this sector and transform it, and it has been gradually transforming it into an industry. And this industry is seeing the potential in biochar, which I'll be explaining the, let's say, like the value chain of biochar. So you people who are listening will be able to picture in their minds, a little bit of the traceability of the biochar, which is directly linked to the carbon credit generation. So before I jump into that, I don't know if you would like to learn a little bit more about IBI, or should I go direct to biochar?
I think a very quick question is that, I mean, it's international organization, so it's not only bounded with, let's say, the Americas, but you also work internationally, globally, with setting the standard for biochar. And then, I mean, if you can explain to our listeners, biochar, how do you produce, what is it, so that, they can picture.
Traditionally, biochar has been traced to millennia, back to millennia. Let's say that the most known place for biochar is Terra Preta in Brazil, where they discovered that in those sandy soils right next to the Amazon, that are not fertile soils, they discovered that there was like a place in Terra Preta where the soil was dark. They said, what is that? And there was fertility. Though in that place, the soils were fertile and a lot of, plants and crops over there. So researchers started literally digging and they found like this carbonish material, and they start, tracing in terms anthropology, practices and everything. And there's a way to produce biochar by pyrolysing. And this is an important word because it's not burning the residues, the organic residues, is to pyrolyze them. And pyrolysis is a process where you or the people who are doing it will depend if it is in an artisanal way or an industrial setting, because biochar now it goes that ways, that at high temperatures you input or you put the organic residues, and in a way that the emissions do not go into the air, but burn the fumes within this process of pyrolysis, and in in a very low oxygen environment, they create this biochar, and the biochar is a mineralization of that biomass. So Kathleen Draper, who used to be the chair of IBI, she has a very good analogy of biochar. And she said, let's imagine that you put a piece of bread into an oven and you put it to toast. And then you close the door in an electric oven, and then you close the door. So you have high temperature, low oxygen atmosphere, and then the result is a piece of toast which looks burnt, which has been dry up, and you just have like the shell. So it becomes biochar. It's a mineralization of that biomass, and it has an amazing porosity, and it's like a sponge. So what does it do? When you use it in an agricultural setting and you put it into the ground, you're not only locking away that carbon that it's been there forever. And yeah, I'm gonna go back just a little bit because something that I missed, and it's very important, that biochar works directly with nature. And why I say that, because the photosynthesis process, it's something that nature does, whether we like it or not. So the plants capture CO2, and then they release the oxygen, but keep the carbon there. So the carbon it's already stored in the plants. So when I'm talking about residual biomass, it's something that has no market, has no use. That when those residues are not disposed properly, they are burned on the open field, or they are let them to rot, which produce methane, which is worse than CO2. So by using repurposing that biomass, we're we as biochar producers and users, we're piggybacking on nature because the process of putting the carbon in the biomass, it's already done. What we do with the pyrolysis process is mineralize and stabilize that carbon content, and that is why it can be locked away that carbon for centuries or even millennia. So you take that, you stabilize it, the carbon is there up to 50% of the carbon content in the biomass is locked away. So you put it, and the risk of reversal is, um, when I say risk of reversal, is that someone lights on fire that carbon and the CO2 goes back to the atmosphere is very, very low because of the same process and the way you use it. So biochar, it's very local. Those projects are very local because they solve an environmental liability for those communities that that probably do not know how to repurpose and monetize that resource that they have, and how to use it to regenerate their soils, to improve their yields and reduce their inputs. But also they can generate additional revenue streams by probably transforming that into another product, and their learning abilities and contributing highly. As you said, biochar is not well known yet, but we're helping to do that. And I told you about porosity, right?
Let me see if I've been a good student. So you can use all sort of agricultural waste. So in my mind came coffee husks from the pulping that they are there, and sometimes they are burned or others through the pyrolysis with a high temperature. Then you mineralize these residues, and they become the biochar. And biochar then, which are the advantages? Because you say it stores carbon, water, porosity. So why is such a critical element for restoring soil and fighting climate change?
Thank you for asking. And just let me make a clarification that when I say now is that a lot of research has been done about biochar, and now we know that not all biomass contain the same energy, lignin, hemicellulose. And what does that mean? That they do not have the same amount of carbon or energy. So not all biochar are created equal. Having said that, and that is why what the standards, those lab analyses that I talked about at the beginning, are important because when you do those analyses, you may assess the quality of your biochar in terms of the carbon content, the mineralization, the water holding capacity, but in principle, you may use all sorts of organic residues, and you may use even manure, agricultural residues, human waste. You may use also, from those water treatment plants, the sludges, and you can also with the proper treatment for those forever chemicals that are there, and you can also use woody residues. And wood biochar made from wood is one of the most reliable ones because of the high content of carbon that it has. But in the global south, with all the the small farmers, there are a lot of potential of producing a biochar with their with a, of, and have this circularity. That is why it's so important, especially in the global south, in the content. Let's say a coffee farmer, they can use the prunings, they can use the husk, they can use the pulp. The difference is that they have to treat their biomass differently because of the shape, of the moisture content, and other characteristics. What is the good news? That now local, especially NGOs in the global south, are working and teaching and training farmers who are interested, in learning how to transform their residues into biochar. You see that every day, that there are more organizations like Plant Village, Solidaridad, Technoserve, that work in in the global south mainly, working with the small farmers. And those organizations have seen and identified the potential of biochar. So, having said that, and you also asked me what is biochar and what is so important. So, research shows that biochar could remove up to 6% of the global carbon emissions annually. And that is roughly equivalent to taking 800 coal-fired power plants offline for a year. And this is a fun fact that blows people's minds. When I talk about the porosity and the surface area, a single gram of biochar can have the surface area up to 400 square meters. That's about the size of two tennis courts in just 1 gram. It's amazing, 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 the porosity. And that is why this high surface makes biochar so effective at holding waters and nutrients in soil, supporting microbial life, and even filtering contaminants in environmental cleanup projects. So it has a lot of advantages. Now, it's also being used in construction. It has been proven like a good additive for the cement industry, asphalt, and concrete. Now are projects that are using them. And also by using biochar, these companies reduce their use of a fossil fuel of, elements, niche, markets. They're making like kind of graphene of biochar because they use the pyrolysis process above 1,000 centigrade, and the kind of carbon that they get is super super high quality, and it has an stability, and this has surface area, and electric conductivity and many things that are researching in the lab. It has a lot of potential other than the well known of agriculture and now of using in the construction space.
And it's a wonderful. I mean, I read here that's such an important point, especially to boost fertility, porosity, water retention, especially for areas like arid areas or semi-arid area in the global south, to support water. So I want to ask two questions. The first one, so if I got correctly with the standards, is there good biochar and bad biochar? So which are the important steps for the process, not to avoid creating a bad product? And you mentioned also the high temperature that are needed. So which are also the constraints of for especially small scale farmers, small order farm in the global south to produce it at scale. So is it possible also to do it in an artisanal way without using maybe very high temperatures?
In the global south and in the global north, there are different ways of producing biochar. When I said different ways of producing biochar, we refer to technology that the biochar producers use. They're like, they call it the aggregated projects, where you have like a facility or a collection place where if you have this group of owners of the biomass that is a burden or environmental liability for them, the biochar developer or project developer gets an agreement with them, and they collect the biomass and take it to a certain location where in an industrial setting will be transformed. And there are several steps in producing biochar. And this is, let me give you, because it is the same but the scale varies, but the process is the same in terms of collecting the biomass, retreating the biomass. And when I said retreating the biomass, I mentioned the moisture content before, and that's very important. It is highly recommended that moisture content in each of the biomass, regardless the biomass, it won't be higher than 20%. And why is that? Because it will help to have a more efficient process and not using additional energy to get rid of the excess of moisture. Because remember that we are drying up the biomass and it will become a mineral. So the less moisture, the better. And also, it is recommended to have like something that is very very important is that biochar is produced with its end use in mind. And why it is important, and I'll tell you. Because let's say that you are going to use it for agricultural purposes for a perennial crop. So that will be applied on top of the soil. So you want a particle size that stays there and gradually will be integrated with the soil, and we won't be blown away by wind or something. So it will stay there. So probably your particle size has to be a little bit bigger. Staying for probably soccer field or golf courses. But if you are using biochar for a seasonal crop that you're going to put it on in the soil and you're going to bury it, your particle size has to be smaller because you're gonna put it on the ground, and you want to have more biochar in smaller pieces, so you will have more chances of holding the water, holding the nutrients, and creating more microbial life. So those are the things. So it will depend, and if you're using it for construction purposes, it has to be almost powder. So if that's what I mean about the importance of pre-treating your biomass before pyrolysis. So regardless of of how the technology you use, the end use is very important. So you collect your biomass and you transform it through the pyrolysis process. The pyrolysis process in an industrial setting, it's you're creating a factory, so it's you have to keep that in mind, that you have to comply with the local regulations. You have to, and those who go honestly for the industrial setting are aiming to generate carbon credits. So they also have to comply with the BMRB documentation process and traceability and the methodologies per se to be able to go through the certification and the audit process successfully to generate the carbon credits. So, and but in the artisanal process, they can also generate carbon credits, but they have to be like this grouped project because it is rather difficult to reach the volume needed to generate carbon credits. And also you need someone, and when I mean someone, it has to be like a manager or someone who is in charge of the project, because a lot of red tape and burdensome in order to generate the carbon credits, but it's also doable. And there are some successful projects in artisanal settings in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America, especially, the global south, because now there are biochar methodologies that allow this thing. And here it's where it is important the training on how to use the Conti kits, because it's an open. Well, I don't know if you have seen them. It's like this like conic pot that you start the fire and it goes by layers. It's not an open flame that goes like burning, because otherwise you will get ashes. And that is why the farmers or those who produce biochar need to be trained on how to put the biomass inside the kilns, how to light it up, how long does it have to be there, and how to monitor the temperature, and when to and how to handle the setting to be safe, to do that, to manage the fire, to how to cool it off, and how to then move around the biochar once it is done. Because once the biochar is done, again, regardless if it is an industrial setting or it is an artisanal setting, it is highly advisable to quench it or to wet it to reduce the risk of ignition, because it's a carbon, it's a material, and it has a lot of heat and energy within. So it has been created without oxygen content or contact. When it becomes in touch with oxygen and still a lot of energy and heat there, it might get on fire because it's a carbon material.
Exactly. And then I'm curious now to know if you can share some example in practice that you have seen that's working. So you mentioned some examples. So an example of the use of biochar that has really improved the yields, the waste reduction, even improve maybe carbon revenue for, especially maybe in the global south, that you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. IBI hosted Biochar Academy, which is one of our, let's say, educational formats. in Kenya in June this year, and we had the opportunity of learning about industrial settings there. There are two near Nairobi, 1 hour from Nairobi, and we saw several examples of these artisanal settings that are working, and some of them are already generating carbon credits. One project from Zimbabwe, it's in between, because it's a mid-size, but it has not this humongous thing like this place that we visited in Nairobi that is Biosora and biological, which 1 hour from that. And what has happened there? Let's talk about the smallholder farmers. They've been working along with Solidaridad, with Plant Village. Plant Village provides the DMRV component. And what is DMRV? Is the digital monitoring, reporting, and verification, which is one of the important and reliable documented process to give accountability, transparency, and certainty that the biochar is produced from the residual biomass, that we are not creating deforestation or using existing residual materials that already has a market. We are not repurposing or removing those to produce biochar. So the traceability goes there. Also the production setting. And what they have done is partnering with this Plant Wood, Plant Village, with these DMRB companies that they provide the guidance and they train the farmers on how to document the production process. And these companies have developed these monitors that are they have this satellite internet. So they're able to connect and monitor the emissions, the temperature, and that gives certainty that you have a high quality biochar, that you're not getting ashes, that you're not getting only burnt biomass, right? So they're doing that. And some of them have already gone through the audit and validation process and started generating carbon credits. So it's amazing how advanced is Kenya in that regard of the carbon credit market and the regulation of the trading system as well for the carbon market, how committed the farmers in rural areas are to do that. And it will depend in the setting, in the geography, that the kind of technology that could be available. Because even though you have probably, let's say, thousands of available biomass, but if you don't have the infrastructure, let's say electricity, gas, or something in the area, it would be very hard to have an industrial setting. So what is it that you have? Fortunately, there are now a lot of varieties of different contiquis, barrels, or even trenches in the ground when there are not possibilities of bringing the contiquis or whatever. They dig trenches. they they're they're trained on how to put the biomass, how to light it up, and the monitoring of the process. So they will, of course, the first time is going to be a failure, but gradually they will learn and they will master how to do it. So in Kenya and Zimbabwe, in Ghana, there and in Uganda. So there are a lot of research and little things being done in Africa. But Africa is enormous continent. So there are efforts, and the objective is to train more. Same in Latin America. There are successful projects. We know of a couple of big ones in Peru, in Ecuador. In Colombia, there are many. In Mexico, surprisingly, there are not so many, but we're getting there. So there's interest, and some governments are turning and say, this could be an interesting solution for the organic fraction of the municipal waste. And in Minneapolis, they have just opened, or they're about to open, a biochar facility. And here in Mexico City, there's they call it carbonization plant, and they produce biochar, dry biochar, with the urban trimming of the trees, and they do something called hydrochar, which is starting to sound is like a new avenue of not biochar because it's not biochar, it's hydrochar because it's wet, and they're doing trials to see if they can manage the organic fraction of the residues of the solid waste residues. And why is that? Because the landfills are at its maximum capacity. So any organic matter that can be transformed without going into the landfill, it's an advantage. So now they're studying hydrochar and see what are the advantages of hydrochar. And this is just a first trial, no science behind behind it yet. It is a little bit acidic, this hydrochar, compared to the biochar, which is also always alkaline. And this could be a solution or something that might help some of the alkaline soils that need an acidic biochar.
Oh, very interesting, and such a an interesting panorama and interesting work that's and such a solution that solved the problem. Even in my experience, when I go to coffee cooperatives and see piles of us, that is where an opportunity can be tapped. And on that, if you can share maybe three lessons, three best practices, three area that maybe NGOs, because they're from our government, can do to really develop the biochar uptake and work. And also one mistake that usually you have seen and that people they should avoid at all cost, which will be.
I'm gonna give you the mistake, and this is a common one, especially now with this boom of the carbon credits. You really that do not rush and make feasibility study, technical and economical, to see if you really have a project, because biochar projects are long term and they take a while, to take off in terms of the settings of mastering how to make your biochar, and also if you're aiming to generate carbon credits, it's a long process, and it requires patience and also patient capital, because you need money and you won't see money coming back to you probably until month 24 or more. So be patient and assess the feasibility, technically and economically speaking, before you engage yourself in making, big investments or big commitments or promises. That is one thing to avoid, that we have seen more and more happening. And you will see now more and more projects failing because of that. And one, if you are a small holder farmer, try to partner with your neighbors. The more the merrier, in terms that if they get together, probably they can even develop like a small enterprise to transform their biochar into a product that can be sold to other, I don't know, communities or towns nearby. That is something that is doable. And I think that could improve the livelihoods of the small communities. That could be done. Another one is to always make sure that you have an end use for your biochar, and that you know how to use it. And it's not an easy thing, but now there are, as I said, organizations on the field that are near or close to the communities or the farmers, the smallholder farmers, that can provide guidance and technical assistance and say, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. So don't be shy about reaching out to those who can provide the guidance on how to do it better and how to do it safer, in a safer way. And number three, let's spread the word about biochar without overselling it, without being objective about the benefits, but also mindful about the journey and the complexity of producing biochar.
And those are really important part because of course any novelty and things gets hype. So you have to be start, do the feasibility, do the work together, start even small, do a pilot and then from there you can ripe and be patient to get the results. And Luisa, if you can give us from your perspective, International Biochar Initiative, so setting the standard, how do you see this biochar movement, if you can call it like this, evolving in the next few years? Will be something expanding and being really a solution to create responsible growth and to fight climate change?
The answer is yes, but we're not the when I say we are in biochar, we're not the only solution around. It's one of the tools that we have to fight climate change, and it's a very good one in my opinion, because as I said, does not only remove CO2 from the atmosphere, but also has these cost benefits and social benefits around. So yes, it is a growing industry. It will grow. Let me tell you, in terms of carbon credit generation, and especially in the removal sector, which is called the CDR, the carbon dioxide removal, there are many technologies around it which are more expensive and a little bit harder to generate than biochar. As of today, biochar is the only technology that has delivered 90% of all the CDRs that have been transacted in 2025. So we're strong, we are growing, and we're gonna see a lot of rising stars and a lot of falling projects. There won't be, there are a couple of big projects out there, like ExxonMobil in Bolivia, Net Zero in Brazil, Pacific Biochar in the United States. But in my opinion, they're like little unicorns, because you need a lot of money and a lot of biomass in the same place and everything to do it. So my hope is how to professionalize the artisanal production in order to bring the benefit to those communities who will really save us from climate change. They're like the anchor and probably the most vulnerable ones. So yeah, it's a growing movement and it won't stop, and it's part of the bigger solution, but it's a very, very good tool, in my opinion.
Fantastic, Luisa. It's been an eye opener, and we really hope that really it will be biochar a part, and do a part also for smaller farm and community, unlocking benefits not only in the carbon market and revenues, but also the benefits for better soil fertility and better yield. So it's been an honor and pleasure having you. Thank you so much, Luisa.
Thank you, Samuel, for the invitation, and I hope this sparks the curiosity of your listeners and want to learn more about biochar, so they can visit our website. They can find a lot of resources, and if they're interested, they can become members and learn more and enjoy more benefits about being part of the biochar community.
Fantastic. Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.